When installing a Cana-Vac docket system, the first and most important step is the installation location. There are 4 criteria to consider when choosing this location. First, structural framing. Second, water lines. Third, electrical. And fourth, most importantly, customer selection. This was our first chosen installation point for our Cana-Vac docket system. We used our previous criteria to help eliminate this location. We found 2 reasons inside the wall that we couldn't use this. Number 1 was electricity running horizontally. Number 2 was structural framing in the corner. According to the Cana-Vac docket instructions, dockets are not to be installed on exterior walls. However, we should not let that be the only reason that we don't install it here. If this is the only possible location available to you, you can build a chase in the garage and re-insulate, thus protecting the docket system from any exterior weather. This is the second possible installation point that we've identified. We used the criteria we mentioned before, and we found 2 possible reasons not to use this. Number 1 was electrical running horizontally through the wall. Second is that this is a common wall to the bathroom, and that bathroom wall has been wallpapered, and we don't want to do anything to damage that when installing a docket. This is our third possible point for installation. This point, although feasible, was ruled out by the customer due to the high visibility. Lastly, this is our fourth point of installation. This spot was ultimately chosen by the customer because it met all of our criteria. It also was the most inconspicuous place, and during our preliminary testing, we found that this location serviced the entire house with one 55-foot hose.
Okay, this is a non-contact voltage detector, and this is very important in using it to locate a proper location for the docket hose management system. This will sense any high voltage that happens to be in the wall, and so once your studs are located and your 2 bays, you want to do, up with your stud, and you want to go down in the middle. If the beeper goes off, you got power. Okay, the first step in installing a docket hose management system is for locating the stud. It's important to find your stud. We've all used the stud finders. We need to find the left and the right edge. Once that is located, we also need to find the metal screw or nail that's going to be in the sheetrock. The idea is to remove the screws that are holding the sheetrock because we want to remove the drywall and reuse the drywall when we're done. Okay, now that we've removed the drywall anchors, I have measured our width and our height for the docket hose management system. We have a 32-inch width. That's center on center of the stud. And we have a 56 height. Now we paid attention closely on our stud seams because we want to make sure that we have a good backing between the left and right drywall cuts. Okay, and now in this instance we removed the drywall and we found that we had our wall was too deep. So what we needed to do is put 2 pieces of drywall furred forward because the dimensions require a 3.5-inch depth. So now that we have our correct depth, we need to cut and remove the center stud. And we'll do that with our tool. Our next dimension is going to be a height of 56. Remember, we have our 30.5-inch by a 56 height bay that we need to frame into. So we're going to do that by bringing a header and a footer to match that 56-inch height. I made a 56-inch notch here. Okay, that does it for putting in the footer. We've maintained our width. We filled up our cavity with wood so that we have good backing here behind the seam of our cut. The next is we're going to place our header up through the top, and we're going to place our vacuum pipe and our low voltage wire through the large hole and our 120 through the smaller hole. Okay, now that we have the header and the footer installed, it's time to put the liners in. But before we do that, we need to give the cavity a real good cleaning, so it's free of debris. Okay, now that the interior of the wall cavity is clean, the next step is to apply the rear liner. Now, the rear liner gets installed with a 3M product called Super 77. They also make a 3M product makes high strength, which is an extra strong bond. The way we do this is we apply it. It needs to be applied to both the back wall and to the liner itself, and then both pieces will bond together. And be quite liberal in your application in the middle. And now we're ready to install the liner. In this case, we're going to be able to tuck the ends in. You need to work fast. It does bond very, very quickly. And then we're going to apply the base. Now this gets applied, this is the stud liner. We have one short one, we have two long ones. And these are going to get applied with the staples. And then with a hammer, we'll go ahead and tap those in. Okay, now the next step is to install a piece of pipe that extends 2 inches below the header. And we've done that. And then we have our low voltage wire that we insert in the pre-drilled hole into the rough end box. And just thread it out the bottom. And then the coupler will accept the pipe, and we need to place some glue on that pipe. And then get a level and make sure that the box is level and that the measurement from the bottom plate to the bottom of the rough-in kit is exactly 42 inches. Okay, to install the electrical, the rough-in box does have a clamp that does remove with a screwdriver, and you can insert the clamp, the wire through the clamp. It's going to come out the cover plate, the switch plate. So what we're going to do here is remove the switch plate, and careful not to lose the screws. Place them on the floor. We're using a very small electronic screwdriver, very fine point. Very sensitive screws. Do be careful because they're just self-tappers that go into a plastic hole. When you do remove, very simply, you'll see a black and a white, and you just match your blacks and your whites. Strain relief clamp. Is in there. And because this is on a GFI 2, we do have a ground to make up. And we'll use wire nuts to connect the white, the black, and the ground wire. Okay, very important to pay attention to the positioning of the cover plate. The switch does say on and off. If it doesn't say on and off, it will have a 0 for off and a minus signal insignia for on. Do want to have the off position facing to the left. The system shuts off and then re-engages when you insert the motor back into the retractor system. Okay, and then the next step we're going to do here is put the provided spade terminals for the low voltage connection with a crimp tool. And once those are put on, we are ready to put on the liner. We made sure that the cavity is free of debris. Tuck these aside. Okay, I find it's best to start with one of the upper corners, get it started, get it tacked, and make sure that's seated, and that way gravity works for you and not against you. Now if there is a little bit of trimming required, we can go ahead and trim. But stapling down on both sides and across the footer is required. A staple every 5 inches is plenty.
Now that we've finished the rough-in installation, got the drywall and painting all done, now it's time to install the finish kit. So the first step is taking the door and the bezel, and the door, if you look on the back of the door, there's a package of screws. These are the screws going to be used to screw the bezel to the cabinet in the wall. As the door frame just sits right inside of the cabinet. So what we're going to do is just go ahead and insert the screws, and we're going to put these screws in by a hand screwdriver instead of a drill driver because we don't want to strip the plastic screw bosses with a drill driver. So that's the door installation. Now we're ready to install the hose and the retractor assembly. Okay, now that we have the door frame installed, now we can go ahead and insert the hose into the cabinet. So what we want to do is we want to slide the hose inside with the magnets heading the magnet stop collars down into the cabinet first. Just maybe a foot or something like that. And then with your left hand, reach back in with the clip facing the left side of the cabinet. But you just want to reach back in, feel for the fitting for the pipe, and just snap it in place. Once you have that, just feel that it's snapped in, just give it a little jerk to make it sure that it's snapped. And pull back out to where the stop collar is visible, so we can attach the retractor assembly. Okay, now that we have the hose installed in the cabinet, we want to install the retractor assembly around the hose. There's a little packet of screws that are taped onto the retractor, and these are the latch locking screws that once the hose and retractor assembly is connected, then we'll take these little screws and screw in two places, one on each side, to hold these little snap latches together, so during operation the retractor assembly won't come apart. So what we'll do is, to open the retractor assembly, there's these little snap latches, one on each side, and what you do is you just take your index finger and your thumb or your middle finger and you press them in and slowly just clamshell or peel open the retractor assembly. So what we'll do is we'll use the gear drive mechanism first, and there's these little ribs, drive ribs on this large black gear. What we'll do is we want to make sure that those little drive ribs are in the recess of the hose. So we get that aligned up good, and we also want to make sure that the magnets on the stop collar are vertical in parallel with the retractor assembly. Now what we want to do is take the other half of the retractor assembly, which has the 180 degree sensing unit here, and we're going to clamshell this back together over top, and then make sure that the snap latches come in and snap together. Okay, now we want to make sure that when we look down the retractor assembly, that the magnet is pretty much vertical and right in the center of the retractor assembly. Now what we want to do is just lay the retractor assembly into the cavity and grab your little latch locking screws. Okay, now that you have your latch locking screws, you put it in a small hole, and it's a self-tapping screw, and just tighten it down on this one side, and you'll notice the latch come forward as you're screwing it in. So you just keep screwing it until it bottoms out and it's snug and tight. Remove and just lay it down, and then install the other screw. Okay, that's nice and tight. Now what we want to do is reach back in and grab our main power line, and we want to plug it in to the top connection there. Then we want to reach back in and feel for the other power cord from the hose with the with the bipolar prong. Plug both of that one in, and reach underneath of the retractor assembly and connect the white cord with the white connector to the white connector on black wires. It only snaps together one way. You snap that in, and then you come in, and it doesn't matter on these low voltage wires which one gets snapped in. Just go ahead and connect both of these. Okay, tuck the wires back up inside, and just slide all the way backwards until you hear the latch at the top of the retractor snap in place. Give it a little tug so it makes sure it's there. Now that we have assembled the hose to the retractor, made all our connections for the wiring, and slid the retractor back in. Now it's time to go ahead and wind the hose back into the wall cavity. Now this particular hose assembly is a 3-function button keypad. It has an on and off. For the round one is an on and off for the vacuum source and also for the power nozzle. And it has a downward arrow, which the downward arrow is for reeling the hose into the wall cavity, and the upward arrow is to retract the hose out of the wall cavity. So right now what we're going to do is wind the hose into the cavity, so we're going to push the downward arrow. And the hose is just going to reel the hose into the wall. Okay, what you just saw there is the system has a torque limiter installed in the circuitry, and what that does, it protects the mechanism from any issues when the hose is caught on an obstruction, a corner, if a child would sit on the hose or anything like that. It protects the circuit board and also shuts down the motor instantly once it reaches a certain limit or pounds of force. So it's just a protective device that was installed in the unit. The rubber cap on the end of the stub tube is used when you have multiple docket installations, say one in the lower level of the house and one in the upper level of the house, that the cap is used to seal the suction at a station that's not being used, so the station you are using, that you get full maximum suction at the one you're using. Also, it's used to protect you know, the inside of the cabinet, so it doesn't scratch up on the end of the tube in the cabinet. And when you want to use your attachment tools, you should go ahead and just take the whole cap and assembly off, and then when you're done using it, just go ahead and put it back on and install it back into the cabinet.